So the last couple of videos that I did in regards to Byron Donalds and his insinuation that black people were doing better under Jim Crow because the black family was stronger and black people were getting married. Um, I did my own video and then I shared some excerpts from Joyanne Reed's interview with Byron Donalds. Now, I'm going to share with you an excerpt from Abby Phillips' interview with Byron Donalds. If you haven't seen any of the videos that I've done, it's because TikTok is suppressing it. So you're going to have to go back and into my profile on my page to get to the videos. But let's listen to what Abby Phillips said to Byron Donalds.
Abby, let me put it like
Jim
this.
Crow era.
Let's agree on something. I am, obviously one of the better communicators in the Republican Party. I know how to put words together.
Obviously
I do it very,
not.
very often. So I'm not going to say something that I do not agree with. What America is seeing right now, especially Black America, is the gaslighting that unfortunately does happen in politics, where you take my comments and you want to weave your own political viewpoint into what I said. What I said is very clear.
I asked you to explain
hold on now.
because I wanted to I want to undo is understand what you're saying here. Because if you're making a comparison, you're saying the black family was together then, they're not together now, and you're using that to try to say that things are bad now. Well, first of all, let me just to set the table here. By pretty much every available measure, black families, black individuals in this country are better off today than they were during Jim Crow. Would you agree with that?
Abby, of course I would. I'm not making that point, and this is the problem. What the Democrats, what Hakeem Jeffries did on the House floor, what Jamie Harrison, what the president of the NAACP, what the Biden campaign, because they're the ones who started this. It was really the Biden campaigns who were trying to cherry pick everything. They're trying to twist my words into saying something. I never said that. What I was talking about was specifically black families. And the point that black families being together is a great thing for the black community. And you do have to acknowledge the empirical fact that before Lyndon Johnson's policies and the welfare state that was created in the United States, I'm not talking about good, bad, or indifferent.
But what about
black families were, black marriage rates were significantly higher.
Well, what about
They're
other
rising
things that
again
might
in
have,
America. That's a good
but
thing.
What
We should
about other
celebrate
things
that.
that may have contributed to the, maybe the decline in marriage rates, which, by the way, is not unique to black families. That's happening actually across racial groups. But what about other things? I mean, what about redlining? Do you think that had an effect
think so.
The black family? What about mass incarceration? What about the war on drugs, which was pushed by a Republican president whose advisor said it was specifically to target black people? What about all of those things?
Look, if you want to talk about redlining and a lot of the other policies that were put forward, quite frankly, by the Democrat Party, if you're going to go back to Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was Democrat policies.
Well,
that's what that was.
I know that
Abby,
you know this.
Don't cut me off when I'm trying to make a point.
Let me just,
Abby.
I have to correct a factual point here. I know that you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of today are ideologically not what they were during Jim Crow. You know that, Congressman. So to suggest that, the Democrats of 1920 are the same ideologically as the Democrats of today is inaccurate. So just, you can continue, but I wanted to...
That's not totally true, Abby, and I think if we want to have that conversation about the policy positions between Republicans and Democrats, we can have that conversation, but
one of the other
Abby,
things...
do you want to have a conversation?
Well, one of the other things,
I'm trying to understand how you want this
brought it up, since you brought it up on the conservative thing, the other thing that you said was black people voted more conservatively. Were you talking about them voting for Republicans?
In part, yeah, because that's just an empirical fact. That's what we know that did happen. And the only corollary that I am making is that when families are together And now you're trying to find a way for you to build wealth within your family unit. You're thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. Because at the end of the day, you want your children to be able to stand on your shoulders. I was very, very fortunate. My mother was able to build a platform for me to be able to stand on and to be able to achieve. Same for my sisters. I'm a very blessed individual because of that. My only point is that when you have a family unit, husband and wife living together, striving together, grinding together, raising children together, you start thinking about public policy in a myriad of ways. And my belief is that dynamic allows people to start thinking about public policy in a much more conservative way as opposed to a much more progressive way. That's my point.
That might be, I mean, I think you're a Republican, so you're entitled to that opinion. But I think what people are taking issue with is you made a couple of statements of fact. And one of the things I was asking you about whether you were talking about Black people voting for Republicans, in the time period that you're talking about, the LBJ time period, they started voting for Democrats. And the reason is because of civil rights, because a Democratic president was passing bills that gave them rights. The Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act of 1965, the Housing Fairness Act. So do you acknowledge that when Democrats Black voters vote for Democrats, it's actually because there's a history there. There's a reason that they voted for Democrats in that time period, not because they were just getting welfare money.
Abby, let me be clear. I don't deny that. I think it's also important for the record to be clear that you had the vast majority of Democrats in the Senate were filibustering the 64 Civil Rights Act led by Robert Byrd, who, by the way, was a mentor to Joe Biden when he went into the United States Senate. So if we're going to talk about the history, let's talk about it clearly and completely. Republicans have been the ones who were pushing not just the 64 Civil Rights Act, but the other 4 Civil Rights Acts that occurred before 1964.
Look,
that's the history
of
the country.
I'm
not denying
there
that.
Were Southern Democrats who
can
opposed,
I finish my point?
Again,
All I'm asking is to finish my point.
On the facts here, there were Southern Democrats who opposed the civil rights bills. But
yes,
a majority of them voted for it. It was also led by a Democratic president. So you acknowledge that Southern Democrats were recruited into the Republican Party in the time period after that. So when you talk about this, you just have to acknowledge that there's been a switch happening in the two parties. It's not the same today as it was during Jim Crow. And so when you say that Black people voted conservatively, that actually doesn't really tell us anything. It just tells us that they voted for the Republican Party, which is a different thing than it is for today.
This lock right here is bugging me. But nevertheless, like I said in my last video, Byron Donalds was trying to insinuate in his statement that Black people were better off during the Jim Crow era because the Black family was stronger and Black people were getting married during that era. And he was doing that because he was trying to muddy the facts of the history. That's my opinion and why Byron Donalds brought up Jim Crow, because he could have made the statement alone that Black families are trying to come together and that's why they're going towards the Republican Party, because they're supposed to be the party of family values. He could have just said that without bringing in the Jim Crow era. But he brought in the Jim Crow era because he was being intellectually dishonest. He was trying to erase how barbarically white people treated Black people during that era by romanticizing or insinuating that in this one aspect of the Black community, things were better. Shout out to Abby Phillips. Y'all let me know your thoughts down below.